SANDHAN, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.
Good afternoon, dear students and faculty members. I'm Rekha Nair, belonging to Sri Jairam Bhai Patel Institute of Business Management and Computer Applications, Gandhinagar. Today I am here to talk about inventory systems, which is a topic related to the mathematics students of the 6th semester. What I would be covering today are the following topics: introduction to inventory systems, inventory control, types of inventory, reasons why we need to carry inventory, the cost components involved in the inventory systems, basic notations that would be used in inventory models, and the basic economic order quantity model. Introduction to inventory systems. We have often come across the word inventory. Now, the word inventory refers to any kind of resource that has economic value and is maintained to fulfill the present and future needs of any organization. You would have heard about inventory. If you go to a hospital, they say we have to maintain the inventory. Go to a shop, go to a mall, go to any place, even your college, your school, you would find that the word inventory is very commonly used. Now, what are inventory? When you talk about inventory, it is categorized into 3 different categories. The first, physical resources. What we talk about inventory on a day-to-day basis, on common basis, are physical resources. For example, there are raw materials. They could be semi-finished goods. They could be finished goods. They could be spare parts, etc. So if you go to your college, your benches, the desk, the blackboard, the chalk, the projector system, they are all physical inventories. You go to a shop, the ready-made garments, go to a mall, the toiletries, the perfumes, and various other materials that you see, which are finished goods, are inventory. If you go to a manufacturing organization, a factory, the raw material, for example, if you go to a cotton ginning factory, the cotton seeds are the raw materials, which are nothing but inventory again. So these are all physical resources which form inventory. Secondly, human resources, that is the manpower. You and I, students, the doctors, the nurses, the patients, the customers, they are all human resources. They also have got future value, they also have got present value, and hence they also come under human resources inventory. And finally, financial resources. The working capital that goes into any organization to begin with is also an inventory. So when we talk about inventory, the categorizations are physical resources, human resources, and financial resources. Now, when we talk about inventory, these inventory cannot be put just like that. They need to be controlled. And why do we need to control? In order to control inventory, there are 3 basic questions that we would be asking. The first and foremost we need to ask is, what items should be stocked? Because now here we would be considering the physical resources. So the items that can be stocked. Now, what should be stocked ideally? When you need to stock any items, you would be requiring physical storage space. So it is not practically possible for us to store innumerable number of items. We would have to stock items that can be manageable at our level. So when we talk about stocking existing items, that is items that are used on a day-to-day basis, that the customers demand on day-to-day basis, or services are required on day-to-day basis, should be stocked at a reasonable level. That is at a level at which you can meet the customer demand. The items whose demands are more, that is, if there is a demand of a particular item which is increasing, that item also needs to be stocked. Unnecessary items or items that are not used for a long time should be removed from inventory. Why? Because when we physically stock these items actually keep or use physical storage space, and this is cost consuming, and as a result of which we have to identify those items that are used on a day-to-day basis and items that are in demand which should be stocked, and unnecessary items should be removed from the inventory. The second question that we need to answer is, when should an order be placed to replenish inventory? That is, when do we identify that this particular item is repleting and we need to replenish it again? In such cases, there are three kinds of approaches in order to maintain the status of an inventory. The first is a periodic review system. That is, we place an order at regular intervals of time. It could be on a monthly basis, it could be on a fortnightly basis, maybe on a quarterly basis, or maybe on half-yearly basis or annually. And the order quantity varies depending upon the inventory that is available with us and at the time the order is placed. So depending upon the inventory that is available to us at the point of time when we are placing the order size or the order quantity is dependent on the periodic review system. Second is the fixed order quantity system. In such cases, a fixed quantity of the item is sent or is placed in order to replenish the inventory when it reaches a specified level, which we call the reorder level. This reorder level for every item is fixed beforehand. Whenever an inventory reaches this reorder level, an order for fixed quantity is placed, and hence this kind of a system is called a fixed order quantity system. Third is the optimal replenishment system. Now, if the level of inventory is higher than the minimum forecasted value, then no order is placed. That is, we have sufficient amount of inventory at hand. Now, when there is inventory already available, we need not place an order. Why? Because more the amount of inventory that we receive, the more the amount of physical storage that we would require. And hence, we do not place an order if there is no requirement. This will avoid the placement of small orders. Now, you'd wonder why small orders should be avoided, because when we make small orders, we would have to make frequent such orders. And when these orders are placed frequently, it incurs more amount of the ordering cost. And the third question that we need to answer at this juncture in order to control our inventory is, how much should be ordered in each replenishment? We said that there are three ways of replenishment. We also talked about how much of item should be stocked. But now when we need to place an order, how much of it should be ordered? Every time we place an order, we incur certain costs like administration costs. That is, having a purchase order printed or emailed, or maybe even a telephone call, or maybe a fax, or a mailing, that is the snail mail that we use. Transportation, that is the transportation of the inventory from the supplier to the place, that is to our place. And also inspection, when the items are received, we need to inspect it, we need to find out whether there are spoilages, whether there are shortages, where there's loss due to some damage of the goods, etc. Now, all this in every order incurs a cost. So if large and frequent orders are placed, then the average level of inventory becomes high, because you're placing frequent orders, that is maybe on a fortnightly basis or maybe on a monthly basis, and they are large in number. So what happens? You may not have met with the demand, or you may not have sold out certain items, and you already have inventory in hand, and still you're ordering a large number of quantity and frequently. Then you would be getting more inventory on hand, and as a result of which you would have to maintain and store that particular inventory, and hence the cost increases. If we make small and frequent orders, in that case, again the cost increases. Why? Because you're making frequent orders, and we just mentioned that whenever we make an order, there are costs involved in administration, transportation, inspection, etc. So when we make frequent orders for smaller quantity, it becomes even more expensive. And hence, the main objective is that we need to find out an optimal, that is, you could say a minimum quantity that can be placed at the same time, not affecting the cost. So we need to find out an optimal inventory policy so as to minimize the total inventory cost. Now, this depends upon the demand pattern, That is, what is the demand that the customer is asking for? If the demand is high, we would have to make frequent orders. If the demand is normal, then we could go for regular intervals of time. Price of an item. Suppose the price of an item is going to increase, maybe due to certain government policies. Then we may go for a large procurement. But if we know that the price is going to remain stable, we would make procurements only as and when the need arises. The discount options available. If you're having price discounts and bulk quantity, you could go for purchasing bulk quantity. So again, large orders could be placed. Total budget. What budget is available to us at our disposal in order to purchase the items. The warehouse space, the availability of the space in the warehouse where these items could be stored in the proper environment. And of course, lastly, the lead time. That is the time lag between placing an order and receiving the delivery at our end. Considering these factors, we would have to decide on an optimal policy in order to order our replenishments. Now we come across the different types of inventory. The first type is called the lot size or cycle inventory. In any manufacturing unit, there are certain processes that are involved. Now, this process is actually dealing with the production of the finished goods. Now, the amount of inventory required in order to complete a production lot size or a production cycle is termed as lot size or cycle inventory. Now, these depend on the production lot size, that is how much of the production cycle inventory is required. Secondly, the economic shipment quantities. We just talked about large, having quantity discounts on a large or bulk quantities. So it also depends upon the economic shipment quantities, the warehouse space availability, the replenishment lead time, the price quantity discount, as well as the carrying cost, that is the holding cost for the inventory. So that is what we mean by lot size or cycle inventory. The second is pipeline or transit inventory. This is the optimal amount of inventory required for the shipments of the item to the distribution centers from the supplier. So if I place an order with the supplier, the amount of inventory I would require to meet my demand during the time my order is in the shipment or in the transit phase is what we term as shipment, pipeline or transit inventory. Now here it is very important that we also need to keep in our mind the unforeseen delays that could affect the transit of the inventory. For example, there could be a traffic jam if it is being transported by road. There could be a traffic jam because you know the movement of the traffic on a particular highway. But there could be a traffic jam on certain instances. So understanding that and then calculating the transit time, we would have to keep certain amount of inventory on hand so that we do not leave in meeting the demand of the customer. This is called pipeline or transit inventory. The next is safety or buffer inventory. Shortages are possible. These shortages could be possible whenever there are uncertainties, and we need to protect against uncertainties in demand and uncertainties in lead time of the necessary delivery of goods. In order to avoid such shortages, additional stock needs to be maintained, and this additional stock is called buffer stock or safety stock, which we term as safety inventory or buffer inventory. This provides a safety margin against future uncertainty. Fourth, seasonal inventory. This is the inventory that we are all aware of. Now we have Diwali approaching, so we know that there is going to be a huge demand for firecrackers. There's going to be a demand for rangoli colors. Now this only happens during Diwali time. When we would be approaching December and we would be requiring calendars, that is the calendar for the next year 2016. Now that is also seasonal. Recently a movie Krish 3 was released, and then we had a lot of demand for those masks worn by Hrithik Roshan. Now that is again a seasonal demand. It is not a regular demand. Now the amount of inventory we need to maintain for seasonal demands is termed as seasonal inventory. Now, this seasonal inventory has got peak demand only during a particular season, and that is why we need to be careful in maintaining these kind of seasonal inventory. And finally, we come across decoupling inventory. In any manufacturing unit, there are processes, or rather I should say a set of processes that are followed in order to convert a raw material into finished goods. Now, when we talk about these processes are interlinked. Now, there are 4 different kinds of interfaces where we would be using decoupling inventory. The first and foremost is raw materials and component parts. That is, this inventory is to be stored at the time the manufacturing process begins. The amount of raw material required for an entire production cycle is what we mean by raw materials and component parts. Since the processes are dependent or interdependent, any stagnation, any break in the process at any of the junctions could be catastrophic to the manufacturing process, and hence it becomes mandatory for us to maintain the required amount of raw materials or the different components that are used in the production cycle. From here on, we need to have work in process or work in progress inventory. That is, the raw materials may be used initially, and subsequently when they move into the next stage, there is certain inventory that needs to be maintained in order to have the entire production cycle running. This is termed as work in progress inventory. Thirdly, finished goods. You need to meet the demand of the customer, and that is why there has to be set amount of inventory stored in order to meet the demand of the customer. So the finished goods, the required amount of inventory of finished goods that need to be maintained are again decoupling inventory. All these 3 inventory that we're talking about, raw materials, work in progress inventory or finished goods, are all part of the product that is being produced by the manufacturing unit. Apart from this, there is one more inventory called spare parts inventory, which are not directly involved in the production cycle, which are not directly involved in the manufacturing of the product, but they are the spare